Welcome back, players. I'm Jacko36Cancel, and this is Coco the Weiss Cat. And players, I am approaching a big milestone in my Schwarz collection. Very soon, I will cross the threshold of owning 100 Schwarz decks. And these are real, built, customized decks, not trial decks or net decks. Obviously, this is completely excessive, and no one on Earth needs this many decks. However, it presents me with a unique opportunity for some cool Weiss content on my channel. So for the new year, I'm going to be starting a new series of videos called Showcasing 100 Schwarz decks. These will be videos where I take a theme and showcase decks that happen to be in my collection that kind of fit that idea. I'll just briefly outline what they do and maybe say some fun facts about them. But of course, all the links to the deck lists will be in the descriptions of these videos if you want to try them for yourself. It's a cool way to really show the wide breadth of Schwarz, how many different decks you can build, and how the game has changed over the years. And keep in mind, these 100 decks are barely scratching the surface. There are plenty of titles that I don't own at all, and many more that have multiple competitive good decks that I just never built. And of course, this is all English Schwarz, and says nothing about JP Weiss or the JP meta. So while this series will be just what I happen to own in terms of decks, I bet you'll still find something cool as we go through. Now with all the introductions done, let's start with today's theme, Classic Schwarz. The decks I'll showcase today are from early Schwarz, back when clean cuts didn't have 4 other abilities, simple reverse level 1 combos were considered strong, and level 3s that both healed and got power were considered top of the line. And a great place to start is one of my first decks from that era, Soundless Voice from Project Diva. Now the entire idea of Soundless Voice is that it has a level 1 climax combo that makes these level 1 lens in the front row over 10k across your opponent's turn. That's really all it does, and that might not sound like a lot, but back then, the only way to deal with that was basically to hit level 3 and play your finishers. In fact, it was a huge problem for many decks that relied on reverse combos for advantage, because you just couldn't kill the lens. Other than that, Project Diva had an extremely solid level 0 for its time, with overstated beaters that hit level 1 under certain conditions, and had decent hand filtering. However, the deck lacks very much in the finishing department, and Project Diva as a whole has very few ways to effectively close out the game. Soundless Voice was actually my first deck, but what I'm showcasing now is a slightly different variation from my original, which I'll showcase in a video with a different theme. Now another deck that presented a problem for meta decks back then was Log Horizon. Log Horizon, back in the day, was one of the only sets to feature level 0s that could directly hate on other good 0s, characters that could move your opponent's characters around on the stage, and the main feature, the best back row level 3 to exist for a long time, Shiroe. Not only did he completely stop effects that burn for 1 damage altogether, but he could also give your opponent's characters -2 soul. Anti-burn is still a rather uncommon effect in English, and back before finishers were a bit more powerful, this was a huge obstacle to overcome. The deck's top end also has a bodyguard character, which was difficult to deal with, and a finisher that could come out early, burn, and heal all in one card. So Log Horizon, for its time, had a great many powerful effects massed into one deck. However, its downfall was that for all of its standout good cards, the bulk of the set wasn't very good, and lacked good level 1 combos, brainstormers, and decent hand filtering. So it was very technically challenging to play, and could still just hard brick if you got unlucky. But we talked about the anti-meta decks back then for a bit, so let's have a look at a deck that was more competitive. Idolmaster, with the red and blue deck with Minami, Chiri, and Ronko, featured a lot of good stuff all in one deck. At level 0, the set had good Rickies, brainstormers, solid hand filtering, and some of the strongest beaters and chasers. At level 1, not only did it have good characters that got a lot of power for their cost, but also has the namesake for the level 1 Minami Nita combo, which was one of the best level 1 reverse combos in Schwarz for a long time. And at level 3, not only did the set have healing early plays and a climax-free replace restander, it also featured a finisher that came out early, salvaged its own climax, burned, and also reduced the soul of the character facing it. The set also had a 2-3 rest counter, the only one of its kind back then. This build shown here was pretty good, however, the more meta variant was more Ronko focused and had a level 1 change combo between 2 Ronko cards, and the finisher was a Mill 5 burn X where X was climaxes. Overall, it was a very solid deck no matter how you built it, and it definitely set many bars for what was considered a good card. Another deck that was less common but offered completely different cool stuff was Kill la Kill. The decks that were most common were red and blue, splashing yellow, but my build here is full on red and yellow to capture the family theme. Kill la Kill had some pretty strong events, including a 1/1 3500 backup and an Akatsuki event that both also served as markers for other cards in the deck. Kill la Kill's level 0 had good runners and level 0 hate, as well as anti-heal. Its anti-heal also changed into a 1-1 that couldn't be reversed by our opponent's effects. However, over the course of the game, it turned far more into a liability since it clocked you when it died. And at level 3, the deck had one of the only good Musashis that existed outside of Kantai, where the Musashi effect first existed in English. And it also had a good finisher that burned on the Encore step and let you add markers from your hand to Encore it, and thus increased how much it could potentially burn for. The decks with blue also had level 1s that got markers to get some power, and a level 3 early play that healed, but had to see 3 of the same 2k1 climaxes in the waiting room to come out early. Like Log Horizon, the deck lacked any good ways to fix its hand or even get pluses at all, having very bad brainstormers and no level 1 combos that garnered any sort of advantage. And while it was a cool set with a lot of flavor, even when it came out, it wasn't considered very strong. On a final note, my deck here actually has a level 3 that has a faded permanent marker signature that's supposedly from one of the English VAs. I have no idea of the validity of that. I just happened to trade a dude for it years ago because I needed another level 3 Ryuko, and I wasn't really concerned if it was going to be tournament legal. Moving on, another deck that joined Weiss Schwarz a bit after what some players might be considered the early days of English Weiss, but still carries the reputation of being a meta-defining deck in a rather early environment, is Two Love Ru. Two Love Ru had a yellow and green deck focused around Mikan and Yami that had a pretty interesting toolkit. At level 0, the deck had decent clean cuts, good brainstormers, and anti-salvage. At level 1, it had 1-0s that hit good numbers, and a pretty good reverse search combo. However, the big draw to the deck was its level 3, which had a very strong Yami finishing combo that packed a lot of stacking cancel burns, as well as a 3-3 anti-damage counter. Interestingly, the set had a level 1 Yami that was able to change directly into the level 3, which I do run in this build for the memes. However, the more competitive versions of the deck declined to run that combo because of its punishing cost. When Two Love Ru came out in English, it carried a reputation from Japan for changing things up when it came out. However, when it was released in English, it didn't make near as much of a splash as people thought it would, since it came into the meta in a different environment. However, it did cause a bit of a fuss at some game stores for the risque art on some of the cards, leading Bushiroad to consider changing some of the looter art for its English audiences in later releases. Well, this is where I'm going to wrap this one up. While this is kind of a taste of classic Weiss, there are plenty of sets that were around back then that have since gotten a lot more cards, like SAO, Titan, Love Live, and Modica, and a plethora of others that I just don't happen to own, like Haruhi, Fairy Tail, Disgaea, or Angel Beats. Again, the list of these decks will be in the description, and I hope you enjoyed this brief window into some classic Weiss. I'll see you again in the next episode with a different theme. And as always, thanks for watching. Peace.